This is the one-page scrolling website that I created for the SSE. I included their logo and their font style, so it's clear. It has clear brand recognition to the representative I was presenting this to. The reason SSE reached out to us to do this was that they have three levels of their business, which is the startup, trade up, and scale up. And they got a lot of people coming to the startup level, but not people moving on to the trade up and scale up levels. So we created this to come up with ideas which would persuade people to follow through and move on to the trade up and scale up levels. The first block in this website talked about the importance of social media marketing. Podcast marketing and the Twitter that SSE already have are both types of social media marketing. And the podcast that is my main idea would be posted on the Twitter, so both can work hand in hand. So I thought I'd just come up with a short graphic which just explained the importance of social media marketing and that they're doing a good job having a Twitter, and that they could do like better with more things like a podcast, for example. So, the following block talked about the 5 benefits of podcast marketing, which I found through research, detailed them in a nice graphic, and talked about the benefits SSE could gain for following through with my idea. The next block was the first, which included an audio widget, which explained my block in more detail and how I compared Buzzsprout and SoundCloud as two podcast hosting platforms, and how I eventually picked Buzzsprout as the one the SSE would put this podcast onto. The following block talked about what I referenced at the beginning, was how in how Buzzsprout plus Twitter, including the SSE, would equal happy customers and customers willing to move on to trade up and scale up levels. This next block, talked about the ideas I had for the title for the podcast. And I created this graphic using Illustrator to outline the drawings and make it more legible, so it looks more like a graphic rather than a drawing, and it just looks interesting rather than just putting podcast title ideas and going on with the titles right under. Just something to liven up the page. Under it, I wrote in all my ideas for the title for the SSE, and the color scheme I made match with my podcast marketing line, so the web page just flows and you see the same colors and the same kind of theme. In it also had an audio widget, as well as some other blocks that I've had audio widgets in, and the audio explained in more detail how I came up with each of the titles and how I eventually ended up with the next step with SSE as my winner. The following block talked about my second idea with the podcast, which was merchandise, and how the merchandise is an opportunity to foster consumer retention, loyalty. It is cost effective in the long run and promotes passion for the business. So I designed on Illustrator as well a mock-up of what the umbrella would look like, how it would be a bright color. They don't have to choose pink, but how it would be a bright color and have their logo on it. And so as they use the umbrella through rainy London, which the business is located, people will see it and maybe be interested to join the business at the startup level. And from there, the podcast and Twitter and other things would make them move towards the trade up and scale up level. Even without them starting up at the startup level, someone that had gotten the umbrella initially at the startup level, having it in their house would just remind them that they can always go back to SSE and they can always continue the business. So yeah, that was my whole one-page schooling website for the SSE.